Welcome, everyone. Hey, this podcast explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspective, societal impacts, and related topics. This podcast often features discussions with experts, individuals on recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insight and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and we're going to be talking about the world needs more connection with our guest today, Brandon Knutson. So, Brandon, thank you so much for being here today. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's Brandon Knutson, just so you know.
What did I say?
Newton.
Oh, I
It's
seem to
all good.
slaughter. I seem to slaughter last names. Why can't you guys just have something easy?
Everyone says Newton, so it's not. I'm like used to it, but I just wanted to make sure we get it right. So
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you correcting me, so thank you very much. And a lot of you guys, we have people from the Red Barn that watch our show. So, guys, I'm marketing you guys today. I got my Red Barn Academy shirt on there, actually in Farmington, an amazing recovery place. So, love all you guys out there. Thank you for everything that you guys are doing. Brandon, what the heck did you mean by the world needs more connection?
yeah, well, it comes from, in my opinion, a lot of the issues that have stemmed from COVID, with the lockdowns and all this stuff like that. But in there's a lot of loneliness out there, and I think that actually helps people go into more of addictive things and things like that. Ideology being one of them, all sorts of different stuff. But I noticed, like, because the opposite of addiction is connection, which is well known. But I think it's more than that. Like, so I just to give a little history, I guess, of myself. There is a period in my time where I was an alcoholic, and I couldn't make it in my front door without having a six pack down the road, for years and years, and then ran into a major slump in my life to where I had to go to AA. Went to 188 AA meetings, and literally changed my life, made me understand that this loop in my head I needed to heal, right? But it wasn't until just about maybe 2 years ago, um, that I got out of an abusive relationship that I was in. And I decided to do something crazy, and I took some mushrooms as a way to help kind of heal whatever I was going through. And I did some mushrooms alone in a closet, blindfolded, so complete darkness. And
Wow.
I asked it, "How can I heal?" And it literally shouted at me that there's great healing and vibration. And I was like, what the heck does that mean? I'm sitting there making all these like vibrations and noises and all this stuff. And then about an hour later, it hits me that the biggest vibrations we have in life come from other people. And I was sitting there like just mind blown because it matched everything that I went through with recovering from addiction, all this stuff. But it made me realize, like, not only is it important for connection for your addictions, it's important for your healing. It's important for all these different things that you're going through. And so it really like made me double down, I guess, on what I do for a living, and that's help people connect and things like that. So it's been kind of really interesting learning that aspect and then applying it. So, in my opinion, we have too many hurt people with trauma, and I really believe personally that the best way that they can heal that trauma is not to go by yourself and to work on yourself and all that type of stuff, but it's really to get involved with other people because it's through them that you realize who you really are. And because you have that contrast, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it is
You know,
interesting.
I agree with you on that, Brandon. I mean, seriously, because 14 years ago is when I started my journey, right? That's when I
Hmm.
started my journey of trying to figure out who I was as an individual, because I found out I wasn't the person who I thought I was. And while I was going into my journey, um, my wife at the time, who is now my ex-wife, she fell into her addiction. And I started kind of going down that road, right? Watching her whole life change in the wrong direction. And doing the networking, you and I have been networking for years. I mean, I've been networking for probably 10, 11 years. You've probably been doing it just as long, if not longer. And talking about the vibration, when you start vibrating in a positive way, a way of growth, a way of love, those people start coming into your life. You start making those connections. And the connections and the people who I surround myself with now are people 14 years ago I would have never imagined being in my
Mm,
life right now. And it's because they're all like-minded people, right? Because
hmm.
we we could go hang with the wrong people. So we got to be very careful by saying, the connections, what connections are we? It's the connection in the direction you want to go, correct? If you want to change your life with people who have been working on changing their life, right?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of a quote by Carl Jung, which is something to the extent of that all addiction is bad, whether it be morphine, alcoholism, or idealism.
Hmm.
And so, like, if you go into, for example, the exact same people that have the exact same ideas as you all the time, you're like you're always going to say a sharp rock. Uh, Versus like if you're in a stream and you're hanging out with people that are going to actually challenge your ideas and your beliefs, you're going to become a smooth, polished rock over time, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those ideas of that I see a lot of um, I see a lot of people getting into their echo chambers, and COVID unfortunately really emphasized that echo chamber because it became this big deal of stay home, masks, vaccine, all these things that separated people, right? And so you got this echo chamber of, oh, I'm all for this or I'm all for that. And there was very little crossover. And we kind of see that right now in like this loneliness epidemic that's happening right now between men and women, because men and women are not hanging out with each other as much as they used to. They are separating more. They're being alone more, and we're seeing, for example, a rise in like left wing authoritarianism within women. And if we take like the Jordan Peterson example, like there's the chaos and order, right? So feminine is chaos and masculine is order and destruction and all whatever. So like obviously they're opposites, but they need each other, right? Because in the middle of all that is where I think things are amazing. And so so in my head, it's kind of sad to see, but there's statistics now that women are becoming more this way, men are becoming more this way, and when people were together and married and all this stuff more, they would actually balance each other out and would be in the middle, right? So we're seeing this huge rise of these extremes, if you will, and I think that's why we need connection more than anything right now. And the way to do that, in my opinion, is not to sit at home and play games, or surf social media all the time. But I mean, if you're on social media, look at the events and go to an event because that's what's going to help you build a connection. If you're super introverted, so I do feel bad. Introverts have a major, problem kind of getting out there in the world and stuff. But it's like if you can help them or they help themselves by actually going to an event, there's other introverts at the event that you can go hang out with. Not everybody at events are extroverts. It's like I think, but we need more of that big time right now, and more than any other time in human history, because we're seeing things in society such as like the decline of birth rates, these systematic ideologies that are taking over, and it's like people are, instead of going to places and willingly knowing that there's going to be people there that don't agree with everything that you believe, you need to go into those chambers because being in these echo chambers, like Carl Jung says, idealism being an addiction. Um, and you can see that in a lot of various groups, and I see it in a lot of groups I go to. Is like people will silence you disinformation, misinformation, all this stuff is a silencing tactic, if you will, because they want to bring you into their ideology and not actually have their ideology challenged, if you will.
Challenge.
And same with addiction. Like, um, I have a family member that's an alcoholic right now, avoids a lot of family gatherings, that type of thing. And I was the same way, years ago when it was probably over 10 years ago now. And, I went to AA meetings, and listening to other people just talk during those meetings was actually connection building for me. And it was what programmed my addiction loops so that I could actually have the strength to be able to stop drinking, right? And I feel like that goes for anything. Like if you're broke, for example, the fastest way to heal being broke is go meet people and create opportunities.
Yeah.
Everybody loves to help create those things for you, but it's like, I think people get broke, they get depressed, they choose the addiction that will help them not be depressed in that very moment versus choosing like maybe some adventure, right? And going out and actually finding someone that they can help, because this is in the networking groups you and I go to, obviously, like BNI, for example, their major motto is givers gain, right? And it's like, if you go out in the world and instead of having this feeling of like, I just want to stay protected and safe, but you actually go out there and you just give and you look for opportunities to do so, you will be amazed at where that takes you. And you and I know, because we've been in the same networking circles for years now. We've known each other for a long time, and
Yep.
it's really interesting because you see the givers succeed way more. Everybody wants to work with the people of high humility versus the people that have all this pride saying, I'm the best. It's the ones that are like, I want to help everyone, that ultimately becomes the most respected, in my opinion.
No, you're
So,
100% right. And it's I'm gonna share something, and it's a part of my life where I was just starting out, right, on rebuilding me, and
mhm,
it was selfish, in all honesty. When I first even heard about chambers, right, I didn't know what chambers did. I grew up here in West Jordan. That was the first chamber I got involved with, and they were talking about volunteering, right? And I did not have the funds at the time. I had just lost my job. I used all my retirement to try to keep my house payment and all the other bills paid, and everything. And they says, look, we'll let you come in and kind of work off your membership by volunteering with all these events that we have, right? And
mm, mhm,
I started hitting my knees, which I hadn't done for a long, long time. Started talking to God, who is my higher power for me, and talking about giving, right? So I'm like, oh, I'm still in that mindset, is Al's going to get whatever Al wants, and he's going to do it however he needs to do it to make sure I get it, right? That was the old me. However, I was still coming in with that mentality. And I'm like, okay, well, God wants me to give. Okay, well, I'm going to go out and give, and I'm going to volunteer so he can reward me, right? That's how my mind was acting. I started out doing it. I was getting involved. Matter of fact, I ended up winning in 2012. I won the Volunteer of the Year award because I was volunteering.
mm,
I was going to all kinds of meetings, committees. I mean, I was loading my calendar. It took about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, where all that was gone, because I was like, I mean, I got goosebumps right now. It's like, I love this. I love putting a smile on someone's face by going up and giving them something. It wasn't about
mhm,
Al anymore, right? For the first time in my freaking life, it wasn't about me. And not realizing it, that was the beginning of my journey for where I'm at today and what I do today in the recovery community and doing the podcast and public speaking. And I've got more things in the works that I've got my hands in so many freaking buckets right now. It's like I'm tossing all these worms constantly, but it's good stuff. And it goes back to that connection again. And I've had people on my show who have been in long-term recovery, and they have said, Al, I go out and give my time, and it is the biggest high I never got from drugs or alcohol. And in all reality, I'm out there to help other individuals, but they're really helping me. So by doing this, we're helping our own soul gain energy
Hmm.
and love and caring, not realizing that's what we're doing, because that's what happened to me.
Yeah. Well, so you and I met because what I do for a living. I run an app called Networker,
Hmm.
and it helps people meet new people at networking events. And so far, I've created over 81,000 face-to-face connections using my app. And it's always amazing to me how if you just go meet people, it seems like fate will turn into these amazing partnerships and opportunities. Like I lived in St. George, Utah for quite some time, and there's two guys down there that my app helped introduce, and they became business partners. And it was really like this amazing thing where they've now turned it into this huge community and event. I believe it's a part of this thing called Yin on Fire down there in Cedar City or whatever they're doing, and it's like this huge connection thing, and it's like it's amazing, when you have two people like it's I'm a huge Carl Jung fan. I'm a Jungian. So but he says, when two personalities come together and collide, it's like a chemical reaction. Both are transformed. And it is so true. Like you never know what person is going to just transform your life completely. And so like when I go out and network, I just started a networking mastermind called Networker Mastermind. Uh, and um, it helps business owners actually come together and meet. And the thing that I find with business owners is they're very much alone, right? They're the ones taking all the responsibility for the company. It is really hard for them to get good advice because everybody that they're taking advice from usually are not business owners unless they have a network. But it's like you never know when like there's a great quote. It's in the book The Soul Art of Not Giving a Fuck is what it's from. And uh, it's a quote that I can say verbatim because I've said it so many times, and it is the desire for a more positive experience is in itself a negative experience. And paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is in itself a positive experience. And what's interesting about that, because I met a business owner years ago, and he started a home doctor visit type company where it's like they'll come to you as a concierge service. And then what's really interesting is he was stressed out of his brain about payroll. And I told him a story when I was going through that because I ran a web agency down in St. George. We had a $40,000 a month payroll. And I remember there's 1 month we couldn't hit payroll. And I had the biggest panic attack the day that payday was. Biggest panic attack. I was in the conference room, laying on the ground, panicking, like feeling like I'm having a heart attack. One of our employees walked out that day, and we had probably 6 employees at that moment. And I felt like the world was over, the business was over. I had no idea where I was going to get this money to cover I think it was like a 30 grand, like 25 grand payroll or something. And I remember coming out after my panic attack subsided, and all my other employees were there looking at me and was like, what now, boss? Like, where are we going to go now? Like, they didn't abandon me or leave me. And I was like, what the heck? And I was like, I guess I'll make some phone calls, right? And I made some phone calls. Within 2 days, I got a $40,000 check that I was able to hit payroll. The one that walked out was mad that they walked out because they thought that we would never make payroll. And I thought that too that day. When I got that money, I was just like, what in the heck? I was not deserving of it, is how I felt, but I was so grateful. And it was one of those weird moments where I realized all the stress that I was putting on myself didn't matter because it was solved within 2 days. And I constantly see people doing that in their life is they'll stress so much about this one thing. And the whole book, The Solar Not Giving an F, that it teaches is you should only give Fs about what matters 3 to 6 months from now. Because if whatever you're freaking out about is only like this temporary, oh, I can have it solved in a month, you should give no Fs about it at all in a sense, because it will be solvable. The big things, the important things, the long-term things is what you should be worrying about. But it's like I thought my whole world was ended that day. I honestly, and I think back then, I was actually going through AA at the time. So it was like really into this whole thing of my own personal transformation. And I remember just like feeling this feeling of, man, I really stressed myself out way too much about something that was easily solved within a couple of weeks. And I think a lot of people do that about every single little thing in their whole life. And it's like they need to take a step back and really think. And I think when you meet, so to go back around to my story, I met this business owner that was stressing about his payroll. And I told him my story, and a couple months went by and he came up to me and he's like, hey, by the way, what you told me really made a big difference in my life because I was stressing so much about payroll and all this stuff. And I realized you were right. I'm stressing way too much about this, short-term goals versus where we're actually heading as a company. And he was able to get himself in a way better position long-term thinking versus like giving way too many F's about something that won't even matter 3 months from now, right? And that's,
Yeah.
we all do that. We're like, oh no, where are we going to get rent from? Or like, how can we have this bill? Bills come, these challenges in our life come, but most of them are not going to matter 3 months from now. So just deal with them and work through them without giving all of yourself and your stress to them, right? And I think a lot of people in addiction, they get caught up in that mindset where it's like they constantly are thinking about, oh, and I failed at this. And they put so much stress, like their whole self worth almost into this thing. And it's like they just want to escape from it, right? But it's like it's actually fairly easy to just step back and not give so many F's, as the book says. So
Well,
anyway.
we condition ourselves that way, right? And society helps us condition ourselves that way to freak out. That's just my version of it. Because I remember
Hmm.
when my ex-wife was first going through her journey with her alcoholism, I don't know how many times she says, you know, I don't know if I can do it. Just knowing I can never have alcohol ever again. What am I going to do
Hmm.
when I go to parties? What am I going to do when I go to Wendover? And it's because she had conditioned herself to think that way, and me not understanding addiction at the time would say, you know, it's a piece of cake because I can have a drink or two or three or not even a drink, right? And I'm not understanding because I've not lived in her shoes. And she even threw at me because I love ice cream. I freaking love ice cream. And she's like, "What if I told you you could never have ice cream ever again?" And me, just like an addict, I'm justifying it, going, "Oh well, mine's not as bad for me as yours is," right? However, it is because it's loaded with sugar and stuff as well. But it's again, it's that worrying about something. I think I read a book, and I don't remember what it was, but I think it said something in there that 98% of the worries that we worry about don't even come to fruition. They don't even
Yeah.
come true, right? Yet we'll constantly beat ourselves up. And then when you said, like, with addiction, I don't know how many times I saw my ex fall back into the addiction just to start coming out of it, to feel guilty, shameful, disrespected, like she was worthless, to go ahead and start that cycle all over again. And I used it as like a hamster wheel, right? She'd go around that hamster wheel however many times it was, and then she'd jump off, And as soon as the dizziness went away, she's like, oh my gosh, I got to jump back on this wheel again because
Mm,
of all this stuff, right? And that's what's good about what you're doing with this mastermind and the businesses. That's why I started ARC, because it doesn't do me any good to go to an AA meeting and get up and talk about addiction when I've not gone through addiction like they've gone through addiction. I don't understand it. I may understand a little bit, and when you're filling a room full of like-minded people who are going through the right thing and who have gone through those trials, who else better to talk to?
hmm I I do agree with that. The facilitators usually depends on what kind of group you go to, because like I would go to the LDS one and to the normal AA one, that's ran by the Alcoholics Anonymous uh, association, or I don't even know if it's an association. I'd need to look that up. But it's like there's a whole bunch of different groups that you can go to that kind of do the same thing, right? And they have usually the same 12 principles laid out as far as those types of things. But in my opinion, the hardest thing for someone that's in addiction is they usually have this shame that they're holding on to. And it's in only the steps 4 and 5 that they get rid of that, in my opinion, which is you have to take an account of all the things you've done wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take all of that, because a lot of it you've never even told anybody in your entire life. And you go and you tell someone, and, depending on who it is, a religious leader or a close friend or something, and you read to them everything that you're ashamed about. And it's interesting because when you're done reading it, you actually realize you're not as bad as you thought you were. And it's this most amazing thing of forgiveness, because you actually, when you finally express fully who you are, and that's a big thing, is like we're all shamed in various ways in life. Like, for example, I'm really big into personality types, because uh, I feel like myself, I'm very misunderstood is the best way to describe it, because I like to be a rule breaker, and I like to think out of the box. I'm very entrepreneurial, um, and it was so interesting because about 12 years ago I took this personality test. It was Myers-Briggs 16personalities.com, and I took it and I read everything in there, and it was a lot of it everything my parents told me not to do, but it felt so natural to me. And I would shame myself for being, oh, I shouldn't do this. I'm a rule breaker and I'm bad because of this and all these different things. And you run into that a lot in Utah, right?
Yeah.
Because like people sometimes will use like religion to shame people or whatever, because it's like, oh, you're going to go to hell if you don't do this. And it's like, oh, if you don't follow these rules, then, and religion is definitely probably where a lot of sadly addiction stems from, is shame, that's religious shame. Because when you take it to the level of God and you put that type of eyeglass on yourself, like one thing that I learned about as I learned about personality types and psychology, and then going through all these things, is the more I would learn about someone that would have perceived shame or guilt or problems, the more I'd actually love them. And even the narcissistic ones that I know, like I'm like, man, you are going through these things in your life, and the more I get to know you, the more I realize you're just a human like I am. You're doing the best you can like I am. All these things, you realize that you can't judge them anymore, because they've had this trauma early in their life, when you get to know them to that level, that has caused them to have these personality disorders, if you will, right? And we call them disorders instead of just like this is nature, because like Carl Jung, he says, he when he dealt with a patient, he had to understand this was a manifestation of nature and of God, the way that this person is in front of him, including all those disorders. Because why would nature create these quote disorders unless it was actually a needed thing in life? Because this is just human nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting, because the more I got to know that, the more I started, especially when you think of things like, I'm not super religious myself, but when you like take concepts like Christ and his ability to forgive everybody, right? if you really think about it and you judge someone that has limited thinking like you and I by that, and you fully understood, like if God could, understand all the neurons within our brain chemistry, all of our history, he would love you the exact same as someone that's about to maybe commit a mass murder or something like that, because he would understand exactly everything that's gotten that person up to that point. And it made me realize it's much easier to forgive someone when you understand them, versus like putting up that wall. And so, in a weird way, as I started thinking about that, I started realizing, like, man, this is why a lot of AA has to do with some of this Christ type ideology in a way, is because you need to get to a point where you actually become yourself and you love yourself. And that is part of going through the 12 steps and like reading, all the things that you've done wrong, because it is like going through a baptism in a weird way of forgiving yourself and unshaming yourself for all these traumas that you've built up. And so it rewires your brain. So instead of being like, oh my gosh, I am not worthy of love, and you're going to hide inside of the loops that you've created, it allows you to come out of those and actually understand with love, right? And that's a thing that I feel like everybody wants in life. And it's like they want a good hug and they want to feel accepted for who they are. And it does, people in addiction, they have a hard time because they hold on to the addiction thinking that's themselves. And then when you actually start breaking down those loops and those negative thoughts, then it's like, whoa, I'm actually worthy of love and I'm worthy of connection. But the only way to get there is by actually getting connection. And it's like almost backwards as far as people in addiction that they think is like, I actually have to go get connection and then I heal. It's not you heal and then go get connection. That's why
Right.
AA works so well, is you go get connection. And so I see it as like, people definitely shame themselves way too much, and they need to love themselves and understand their flaws are not that bad. Because a lot of people that get into addiction, they're usually they're usually running from things that are not thoughts that they've created. It's what other people put into you, right? Like self-esteem is like a virus. It comes from other people, that type of mindset, right? And so low self-esteem, I should say. So it's like if someone tells you you're dumb and stupid and you start feeling this, or if you do something wrong and they shame you and they blame the wrath or bring the wrath of God upon you, so to speak. Oh, you're going to hell because of what you've done. It's that is something that people are like, oh my gosh, I think they're right. And they'll go into these addictions as a way to avoid the full experience of the wrath of God themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's the way that it works.
And we allow other people to put labels on us way too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Way too much. And there are times we even put our own labels on in all reality.
I
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, when I took that personality test and I read it, it was the first time that I felt like I could really be myself, because it was, in my opinion, it was the first time in my life, I was 24, 26, that I really felt seen. And I've actually helped many guys, and I've tested over people. So I even run a podcast called Personality Lounge, talking about personality types and stuff. It's not something I've been doing lately, but I have several episodes out there. But it's interesting because I will go to a guy and they're feeler men. So like on a Myers-Briggs scale, an INFP, on an Enneagram scale, a type 2, which is a helper. They value helping other people. And they'll give everything of themselves to other people to the point that they collapse because they never take care of themselves. It's like just the way that they work. And I've had several men that I'll go up to and I talk about this and I show them, and they've all cried big time in front of me because it's the first time they've ever felt seen in their entire life. And because as a man, you feel like you need to be a man and you got to go out and you got to be strong and you can't cry, right? And all this
Don't
stuff. And
don't
it's
show
like,
emotions.
yeah. And it's so interesting because when you actually like see them for who they are, they become your best friend, and they literally break down because they aren't used to having that type of feeling. Like it's almost like someone giving you a rose, which men never get roses, right? I actually received my first rose several weeks ago. It was at an event that I went to. They gave them to everyone. But when I received it, I was like, this is weird. I'm not allowed to receive a rose. I'm a man. And I was like, and this beautiful rose in my hands is for me. And I had to like allow myself to accept it. And I was like, wow, this feels so amazing to be given this, thing that I give girls roses all the time and stuff. But it's like this crazy experience that men hardly ever have of like feeling like, oh, you're actually a special person. You deserve to be treated specially, all these different things. And like we hide from it. And it's sadly some of it comes into addiction. So,
Yeah, it does. I used to go to a men's group. It was, I believe, on Monday nights, and it was a couple years ago when I went to it.
mhm,
It's over at a guy's house, and all these guys started coming in. I got to meet quite a few cool people. And it's almost ran like an AA type meeting, right? You sit down, you pick a subject, everyone goes around and says why they're here. Why are you here, today? And everyone shares why they're there. We'd break off in groups, and would break off in groups of 3, 4, 5, just depends on how many guys was at the event. And we only
mhm,
could go so many because we're in a house and there's only so many places you could go. And the house was fairly open. And I remember looking around, and I have never been in a room or in a vicinity of that many men all crying.
mm,
And I was and I'm not making fun of it because I was one of them, right? When I went started sharing whatever that topic was, because we had to pick something about our life that had to do with that topic, right? Just like what they do in AA meetings. I was just in awe. And some of these people were happily married, some were not. Some were in bad relationships as far as not being married, but with a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
mhm,
There were some who were very, very successful in business. There were some not so. There were ones that were going through a lot of crap, like myself at that time. And I come to realize that moment how we're all alike, all of us, right? And all these guys are like manly men, right? They were brought up the old
mm,
fashioned way. Don't you dare cry, or I'll give you something to cry about. Don't you dare do this. Don't you dare do that. Oh, you're in pain? Suck it up, right? I mean, these were guys that were pushed, and no knock or whoever it was teaching them, whether it was their grandpa or their dads or uncles or whatever, because that's the way they were brought up, right? They were just passing the torch per se. But it was so cool to see all these guys coming together and being able to open up and feel safe to open up without the judgment, and knowing that those connections were there, just like how AA works or the recovery community, right? It's to be able to have that connection and your mastermind. It's so important to have networking groups or events that are like that, because we can all help one another. And when we're doing that, in my eyes, we're doing more of God's work than anything, right? We're
mhm.
not out there preaching a religion or pushing a religion or whatever. And for me, and I'm not knocking these, so I want our listeners to know I'm not, if you're a religious person and it works for you, man, keep going, right? Amen. It's more spiritual for me. And to me, it brings it all together, right? When we start bringing all this together, the energy starts growing. It's expanding, and we start growing. And while we're helping other individuals, we're actually helping ourselves more by doing this. I mean, this podcast will be going 3 years in March next month. And I tell you what, the stuff that I have learned, whew, tears are starting already. The stuff that I have learned and the person I have become, which I'm still growing, is because of people like yourselves who have been on the show and sharing what they've gone through, right? And I'm unplugging bad neurons and plugging into a good neuron, right? Because they're bringing it to me. They're bringing that energy to me, and it's making me open my eyes and going, "Oh my gosh, I thought I had this. Really, I don't," because this person just what they said to
Mm-hmm.
myself that I don't have it all together, right? Okay, I need to take this now and I need to start working on this. That's why I like to say on the show quite a bit, there is no finish line when it comes to working on yourself. It is an ongoing process, just like recovery is. It's ongoing, it never stops.
Yeah. Well, just like I said, the biggest vibrations we have in life come from other people.
Yeah.
And it is so important to go out there and network and be around people that you agree with and disagree with. Probably more important because the people you disagree with, either you have the better ideas or they do, and the vibration will win, right? But you can't be afraid of it, and you can't be running away from it. You got to go out there in the world and make a difference, and that's all you have to do is go out
Yeah.
and let the world will put you in the right position, the right people, all the time. And the people that are you're meant to make a difference or that are meant to make a difference for you will just happen. And it's just the right thing in life to do. So
Yep. They'll just show up. It just happens. It literally just happens. And it's crazy how doing what I mean, you and I, you said it earlier. We've been networking for years. That's how we met, was through networking.
mhm.
I would have never known what your journey was until you and I just actually ran into one another, connected again after how long, right? Probably since 2020 or 2019, right? And
Yeah, I believe it was because of you doing these podcasts that I
yeah,
started connecting with you again. And we talked and you're like, hey, and now here we are kind of sharing our message and stuff. But it's like I noticed like you said something once that I connected with, and I was like, hey, by the way, what do you think of this idea? And you were like, oh, I like that, and I believe in that, and all this stuff. We started having these conversations outside of all this.
yeah,
And but in reality, my biggest belief in life is literally connection solves everything. And it's the opposite of addiction, and I love that mentality, but I also think that it does way more than that. And because in as humans we are connection animals, and it's we don't survive by ourselves. We have to have the entire world and the entire economy and the everybody doing their little piece to make it work. And I know some people feel like they're insignificant, but in reality, they're the center of their networks. And the people that you and I are affecting within our network is going to affect their networks, and it's going to radiate out from you in the center. And so really you are the most important person in your network because everything you do is going to affect everyone else.
yeah,
And um same with them hitting you. And so it's just like it's all vibrations, right? And it's all moving around, and it's just yeah, I mean, and even these ideas in this podcast, for example, like just the people that will be able to like listen to what we're talking about, if it resonates with them or not, it's going to help them realize like, hey, maybe I need to go out more. And I'd be like, hey, my biggest thing for anybody listening to this is you need to go out and network more and go out to events more, but don't go out to an event and don't talk to anybody. Try to, even if you're an introvert, because I'm an extrovert, but I'm somewhat introverted. Um, I'll just like sit quietly and just kind of look amusing or something. And you'll be amazed people will actually come up and talk to you because you are putting out the energy and it comes back. But if you're like, you go to an event, you don't talk to anybody, and you leave early, and all these things, and you don't have a chance to do that, I feel like you're missing out on the real connections that would change your life. And
Oh,
it's like, show up a little early so that the people putting on these events get to know you personally, because they're like, oh, who are you? There's only 4 people here. I have no choice but to talk to you now. And then at that point, leave late. And so you actually have an opportunity for people that are, also hanging out to come talk to you. And it's like, I think that those types of things are important because there's so many people that just put on the blinders, show up, don't talk to anybody, sit by themselves, all these different things, and they leave. Like you and I are natural connectors, so we always don't sit alone whenever we go somewhere, right? Like people are like, "Hey Al," and "Hey Brandon," and all sorts of stuff. So it's like that. It's really exciting because then you feel like you're a part of a community.
right.
But I always try to reach out to those that I feel like are kind of sitting there looking for someone to start a conversation. I'll go and be like, "Hey, what's up with you? Tell me about yourself. What do you do? What do you have going on in your life? What do you like to do for fun?" That's an important one. Like I am a music guy. I like to play music a lot, like piano, and I have kids and we play games and all sorts of fun stuff. And it's like it's fun when you connect with someone. It's like, oh, you have kids too? What ages? Oh yeah, that's the best age, right? Because every age that kids are keeps getting better, in my opinion. My kids are about to become teenagers, so I may change my mind in the future of that.
Uh,
But
both mine are in their 30s.
yeah, yeah. So, but it's like even at that age, it's like now you have grandchildren
Oh yeah.
starting,
Yeah.
and it's like that becomes the whole cycle all over again. I see that with my parents, with my kids, of like their whole world now revolves around their grandchildren instead of their children, and they're the ones they want to help is to make sure that we're doing the right things to make their grandchildren's lives correct, right, or good.
Yeah.
So,
You know,
but
and
it's
and I love how you just talking about the networking, because you and I, again, we've been doing it for so long. It's easy for us to spot the ones that are uncomfortable there, right? I remember years ago when I was working as the director of member relations for the West Jordan Chamber, we went to a ribbon cutting at a credit union that was opening up off of 5600 West and about 7800 South. And we're inside this credit union, and people are around chatting, and I look over, and there's this beautiful young lady standing up against the wall with her arms folded, and she's just sitting there and she's watching everyone. And I remember Rick, who I used to work with, he comes over and he goes, "Do you know who that is?" I'm like, "No, I don't." He goes, "Yeah, me neither." And he goes, "We should go talk to her." And I'm like, "You know what? I'm going to go over and talk to her." So I went over and I said, "Hi, my name's Al." And she introduces herself, right? And I says, "You're over here by yourself. All these people are over here socializing. What's up?" And she goes, "I don't know anybody here. The company I worked for
Mm.
needed to come to this, and I don't know what to do." And I says, "You don't know a soul?" She goes, "I don't." I says, "Yeah, you do." I says, "You know me. I just introduced myself, right?" And I says, "Come here." I says, "Are you comfortable to come with me?" And she goes, "Okay." And I says, "Let me introduce you to some people." I don't know how much time went by, but people started calling her and I Mr. and Mrs. West Jordan, because I was always out there
Hmm.
socializing, getting out and talking to all these people. And she started doing the same thing. She used to thank me so much, going, "Al, thank you for breaking me out of my shell." She goes, "I have had
Yeah.
so much fun doing this, right? And meeting so many people. And we still stay connected on social media. We haven't seen each other for years. She works for a different company, and I love that about networking, because even with First Fridays that's still going on, right? I just did this last month. There was a gentleman that walked over, and he walked in and looked around the room, and then he walked out, and I thought, uh-oh, he's left already. And then he came back in and he kind of walked around, then he walked right through the room and went to the other end of the room, and he's looking out the window. And I'm watching him as I'm talking with someone, right? And I'm thinking, okay, okay. So I finally told the person I was talking with, I'm like, "You know what? Let's connect. Let's connect a little bit later. But there's someone I need to go talk to." And so I went over and
Hmm.
introduced myself to this guy and did what you said, right? What is it? What is it that you do? Every once in a while I like to ask new people, what is it what do you do to change the world? I think that's a good way of starting it because it gets their head rolling like, oh my gosh, no one's ever asked me that before, right?
Hmm.
And that connection is so, so important. And it does make us feel loved, and it makes us feel like we're a part of something. And I was watching that happen yesterday up at the state capitol. I was at a recovery event up there yesterday afternoon, and I was watching so many different types of individuals who are all really basically in the same boat, right? With some type of addiction or another. So many different faces, so many different backgrounds, and you're even watching them going up to other individuals. Hi, I'm so and so. Oh, you're with this recovery outfit? Yeah, I went there once. And I'm watching all these
Hmm.
connections happen, and man, it's just powerful. It's just powerful as can be.
Yeah, well, we need more of it, especially because we're dealing with this epidemic of loneliness or that's happening, and I think so many people are feeling secluded. And I would say, yeah, if you're someone that is in a networking event or any event and you see those stragglers, you should be the one to go introduce yourself because, like you said in that thing, you totally brought that person out of their shell and they were able to go become like this amazing connector. And it's like giving someone that skill, someone gave it to me. Like I remember working my butt off for a business pitch competition I won, and I got a free year of a networking group back in the day called Corporate Alliance. And I went to it and I met my business partner there. I met my investors there. I met all these people, the customers there that ended up growing my business, and it was the best thing. Like we grew our web design company to 400,000 a year just by going to networking events. No advertising, no outbound cold sales, networking. And it cured our pocketbooks, right? And we helped other people cure their website needs because like not everybody is a technical person. And so it's like, hey, I need your services. I'll pay you money. And then I need tax services. I pay my accountant money. I pay all these different types of people money. It's like, and it's just the energy flow of all that type of stuff. But it doesn't happen unless you go out and network. And, same with addiction too. It's like, um, if you want to cure anything, you just go meet enough people. You'll find someone that actually has the answer to help cure it. I mean, it's like everything. And so, yeah.
And there's so many different ways of doing it, right? Because what
Yeah.
works for you may not work for me, right? However, when you
Mhm.
do go out in those communities and you make those connections, it gives you so many different options, so many flipping different options. And it fills your tool belt
Yeah.
with so many different tools. And you just said it, right? You'll find the one that you need.
Yeah. It's every time. When you have intentions, it's like putting on, glasses, like a lens to look through, right? And it's interesting because, if you want to be more positive, you just got to put on a positive lens. You'll start seeing more positive things. If you want to think more negative, put on a negative. You'll start seeing them because that's what you're focused on. And it's like, if you focus on, hey, I need this type of thing, and you don't go out there, like one of the biggest things, I'll just share the story real fast is, um, I used to, when I was networking, I would go to an event and put dollar signs on people's heads. Oh, this person would buy my product, so I'm going to focus on them. I stopped doing that because of this lesson that I learned, which was one time I went to an event, grabbed my lunch, sat down at a table that they assigned me, and all the people at the table was not going to be my customer. They were like a realtor that already had their company, website where they were like a sales employee that they already had their whole company built. And I was sitting there like, oh man, this is going to be a waste of time for me. And I was like, maybe I should leave. And I remember having that feeling that I should just leave the lunch. And but then I had this other feeling because it started. I was like, oh, I'll eat my lunch and I'll just have fun, and then I'll leave. But it's just a wasted event, is how I felt. So I created this relationship with this person next to me that was a realtor, And we laughed and we had so much fun just by being there, right? Just by being in the moment. And then within a week, they referred me a $70,000 deal. And it blew my mind that I was sitting there looking at all these people for $1,000 websites. And yet this person that I just built a genuine relationship with brought in this $70,000 deal that fed our company for like 3, 4 months. And I was sitting there just mind blown, like, oh my gosh, it isn't the person that you network with that's important. It's their entire network behind them.
Exactly.
And it's like you never know how someone's going to change your life, but when you get to know them genuinely, without a vendetta, if you will, like, oh, I'm going to sell you into my, solar business or something like that. Like, there's one networking event that I went to. This solar sales guy came up to me, and I kept asking him, "Where are you from?" All these personal questions of like, "What do you like to do for fun?" and all sorts of stuff. And he kept going right back into his sales pitch. And I was sitting there like, you're not going to sell anybody because and I love the phrase, it's when price and performance are equal, the relationship trumps. And what that really means is the person that's actually going to build the relationships always get the referral. And it's like, so if you just focus on relationships and the connections and all those types of things, all of it will come right back to you because you're not selling, your relationship building, you're creating friendships. And those are the ones that succeed the most in networking, is they go to an event and they get to know someone and they maybe help them. And that's the best thing, is when you have humility and you go into an event and you say, I'm not that special, but I do want to try to help you the best I can, instead of saying, I am the only guy you should talk to, my ego and all this stuff, right? It's like, I have some knowledge around the subject. Like, I'm a web designer. So like, I'll go and I'll be like, oh yeah, well, what are you built? What is it built in? What is all this stuff? But I never go up to them and say, you got to choose me because I'm the best web designer in the entire area. I try to have that humility of like, let me help you and give you some advice that I think would actually really help your business. And naturally, they want to come back around because I'm not selling them, I'm helping them. And then at the same time, they appreciate if I have good advice. So, like, obviously, make sure you give good advice of that you're, in my opinion, qualified to give. Ooh, that's cool.
Hey, I
Um,
got some balloons.
anyway, don't give the peace sign or else you get balloons.
Yeah.
Um, So but it's like, make sure you're qualified to give some of this stuff. But it's like, if you just focus on helping people with certain things, I think that it comes right back around every single time. So thumbs up. Let's see if it does it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
here it
got you
is.
got the hey, that's pretty cool. I don't think I have any of that. No, I don't have any of that fancy stuff. No, you're 100%, you're 100% right on that, Brandon. And I've had a few people that I've invited to networking groups who've not ever networked before. And one of the first things I talk to them about is don't throw up on the people. And they're like, what do you mean by
Mhm,
like literally throw up? And because I'm nervous. I'm like, no, don't go out there and throw up your product. You're there to build relationships. They
mhm,
will do the selling for you,
mhm,
because once they get to know you and they know you're an awesome person and they believe in you, that's when the magic starts happening, right?
mhm,
I had a gentleman years ago when I was with the chamber, used to be a chamber member. I went out and talked to him, and he goes, "Yeah, I used to be a chamber member, and um, I didn't get anything out of it." And I says, "Really?" I says, "Well, when you was a chamber member about a year ago, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I says, "Well, that's funny because I've been involved with chamber for the past 3 years, and I've never seen you."
mhm.
And he goes, "Well, they told me that I'd get all this business by being a chamber member." And I'm like, "Well, all this business from who? People don't know who you are. Just because you sign up as a member doesn't mean anything, right? That would be like me doing my podcast and then not ever having a show, right? How do people
Yeah.
know who I am?" And I was telling him that when I first got involved with chamber, I was helping my brother build his concrete business. And he goes, okay. He brought that back up. He says, well, you told me that you used to go to the chamber and sell your brother's concrete business. And I says, okay, you think you're so smart. I mean, literally, he was that forward with me. You think you're so smart. Um, how much business have you got from chamber members for concrete? I said, in all honesty, zero. And he leans back and he goes, but yet you're telling me I need to go to these networking groups because it's going to help my business, and he's going on. And I says, well, you asked me the wrong question. And he goes, again, oh, really, smart ass? What was the question I needed to ask you, right? Because he's being this tough businessman. And I says, well, you didn't ask me how much business I got from people in the chamber referring me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, how much business you got? And I says, just this year so far, I've gotten 2 jobs and it paid very well, both jobs. So again, it's that connection, like you're saying, the whole world absolutely needs it right now. We've been divided. It's time we start coming back together, start helping one another. That's how I see our higher power wants us to do. We're here to help as many individuals as we can. And even if we only help one person in a year, that's one person that has been touched. And you don't know how many people that person's going to touch, right? Because you said earlier, Brandon, somebody did that for you, right? Somebody did that for me too when I got involved. I didn't know how
Yep.
to network, and it was for people like ourselves who we are now, right? That been doing it long enough that did the same thing, grabbed our hand and says, here, let me show you the ropes and let me help you out. And it helps
Yeah.
us in so many different types of ways, whether it's addiction, whether it's in business, whether it's different types of resources, it helps us so much. And I just had something happen to me today. I got a text from somebody out of Canada who I interviewed on the show. And they asked me if I've ever heard of this person. And I'm like, no, I have not. Well, this guy has like one of the biggest addiction magazines that's out there. And he's interviewed some of the top movie stars and whatever. Well, come to find out, this person that I interviewed is really, really good friends with him. And he's like, you want me to connect you? And I'm like, oh, hell yes, please. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's something that I wasn't looking for, but because of these connections, somebody, well, they know what I do because they were on the show and they thought that good fit was there. And I've had quite a few of my guests come on the show that have been referred by other people like yourselves, going, hey, you need to get a hold of this dude. Yeah, you talk to him about being on the show. And man, it pays off. It pays off and it helps us grow.
Yeah. I'll say one final thing before we wrap up. Uh, I forgot the story is called. I just heard it recently. I guess Mother Teresa would say it all the time. But it's the story is that there's tons of starfish on a beach drying up, and there's someone that would grab them and throw them back in the water, and they're like, "You're not going to make any difference." And he picks up another starfish. He's like, "I'm making a difference for that one," and he throws it into the water, and is like, "That's the right method. Whether it's one person a year or whatever, you do make a big difference for those ones that you do touch."
And
So,
I know the story. It was told to me as a little boy walking down the beach with his grandpa, and all these
mm,
starfish were washed up, and he kept picking them up and throwing them in. His grandpa finally said, you're not going to make a difference. Look, there's thousands of these. And he picked one up, through it, and he says, I made a difference to that one. So yeah. And that
yep.
is so true. That is so, so true. Yeah. So Brandon, one last question. Well, maybe two. What would you want our listeners to gain from this show? And or what would be your main message?
Uh, Basically what I said earlier, which is, there's great healing in vibration, and the biggest vibrations we have in life come from other people. And that goes both ways. You can be that connection, that vibration for someone, they can be that for you. So go out and go to events more than you are right now. Don't seclude yourself at home. Don't keep watching Netflix every night. Literally go to events and your life will change. It's happens to everybody. And like if you're addicted and you're like drinking every night, playing games or watching shows as well. If you just change that one little habit and just start going to more events, everything else in your life will change. And I recommend that highly is instead of being so secluded, get out and connect. People love you and they're going to help you in all the different ways. So
I love it. Great. Thank you. And thank you again for taking time out of your afternoon to be on the show and sharing this connection concept. It's a great, yeah. I thought it was a great show and there was a lot of great information that was shared in it because definitely we need it. So again, Brandon, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you.
yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you to all our listeners, all our guests, all our past sponsors, guys. Again, we couldn't do this without you. You guys are the ones that's making this all possible. And remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.